Now I'm gonna preface this by saying that I don't think this is actually the case, but I think it should be the case. So I'm gonna play devil's advocate in this video. Now the reason why I think that Kawaki should still technically have Isshiki's karma is based entirely around the mechanics behind how the Shadow Clone Jutsu works. And this was explained early in the Naruto series, or early in Shippuden really, where Kakashi kinda explained to Naruto that he can use his Shadow Clones to kinda increase his experience and increase his power, which is how Naruto used the Shadow Clone to kinda master his nature element. If you go back to his training arc in Shippuden, Naruto created multiple Shadow Clones and used them to aid him in reducing the time he needed to learn Wind Release. And this is done because whatever the Shadow Clones learn or experience is basically transferred to the user upon being released. So it's kind of an hacks ability where someone who has the chakra and the ability to create the multi-Shadow Clone Jutsu has the ability to kinda reduce the time taken to master any ability, where someone who doesn't have the ability or the chakra to use multi-Shadow Clone Jutsu has to take the years and time to practice. So Naruto here is using this power to reduce his training time basically. And even if we move forward to the war arc in Naruto Shippuden, Naruto's Shadow Clone who was fighting the real Madara was able to release himself and relay a message given to him by the 5 Hokages to the original Naruto. So you can see that he's also able to transfer memories basically from clones back to him. So it's not that he's only able to get the experience of the clone, the chakra the clone collects, but also their memories. So you can see how OP this power actually is, and this is really shown in his fight against Sasuke where Naruto and his Kurama clone, because you remember that when Naruto clones Kurama, he also clones himself because Kurama is really within Naruto. So whenever you see a Kurama clone, there's a Naruto in the head of that Kurama clone. So when Naruto cloned himself and that clone also went Kurama mode, that clone was able to gather all the nature energy in that entire area and give it to the original Naruto, and that Naruto was then able to match Sasuke's 9-tailed beast induced Angel's arrow. So you can see the amount of power a Shadow Clone alone can amass to give to the original Naruto, which shows that this power is really OP. But this kind of leads me back to Kawaki here, because we have to remember what happened in that arc and how Kawaki actually defeated Isshiki. So what Kawaki actually did was create a Kage Bunshin, or Shadow Clone, or whatever you want to call it, and Isshiki didn't know that it was a Shadow Clone, and Isshiki placed the karma on the Shadow Clone thinking that it was the real Kawaki, and then the karma actually evaporated from that Shadow Clone, and then Isshiki basically died because he ran out of time. So that's basically how Kawaki defeated Isshiki. Now if we go back to how the Shadow Clone Jutsu actually works, we have to remember that Kawaki did release that Shadow Clone, and based on the mechanics of the Shadow Clone, all that information collected by the Shadow Clone should have been transferred to the original Kawaki. So if we assume that the mechanic of the Shadow Clone where it transfers all the information it gains is automatic, that the user doesn't have a choice, then Kawaki should have received all the data that Shadow Clone received. So if you go off based on how the karma actually works, they explained it in kind of a scientific manner where it's basically just data extracted into a body, and then that data is basically used to overwrite that body, right? So if we go based on all of that and how we know how computers work, let's say I transfer data to the computer from a flash drive or a thumb drive, whatever you want to call it, and I schedule an upload to the iCloud or to the server at 6 p.m. Now obviously the data transfer would start at 6 p.m, it wouldn't finish at 6 p.m. because that's how it actually works in the real world. But if we're going to go off the mechanics of the Shadow Clone Jutsu, all that data is immediately transferred. So let's say that I set it to immediately transfer to the cloud at 6 p.m. All the data on the computer, everything is transferred to the cloud at 6 p.m. That's exactly how the Shadow Clone Jutsu works. So even if the clone is destroyed or whatever, or is released, every data on the clone, or the data that the clone has gathered, should be automatically uploaded to the original user, which is Kawaki. So technically, the karma data should be transferred to Kawaki automatically upon the release of the Shadow Clone. So Kawaki should technically still have Isshiki's karma. Maybe it takes some time to awaken, because if you remember correctly with Boruto, it actually took a couple weeks before the dot actually, or the diamond actually show up in his palm. It didn't show up immediately. So it could take a while for the karma to awaken in Kawaki. But if you go back to the manga chapter, Kawaki still doesn't have it, and I believe that's 6 months later. So maybe this theory is disproven, but I'm not really trying to prove it that it is exactly what is happening in the Boruto series. I'm explaining why it should be the case, you know? I'm explaining the logic why it should be the case, not that it actually is, you know? So how this works and how the mechanics of the Shadow Clone Jutsu works, this should be the case that Kawaki should technically have Isshiki's karma, but for some reason he doesn't. And this is ignoring the fact that even though Isshiki died, he should have still been able to give Kawaki the karma, because we also have to remember that it was after Momoshiki died that he gave Boruto the karma in the astral plane. So Isshiki should have been able to do the same thing, but I don't know why. That's another plot hole in the series, but we shall see. Maybe they address it, maybe there are some like technical explanations to it, and maybe Amado is involved in some way. But yeah, that should have also happened, but it didn't. So I'm just explaining the theory for the Shadow Clones here, so I don't really want to get into that one. But one thing I will say is that there's an easy way to discredit this theory, because if we look at the karma in a different way, right? If you look at it like the karma itself is like the thumb drive and not the data itself. So the karma mark is the thumb drive and not the data itself. So the data is being transferred from the karma onto the user. So we could technically say that Jigen did put the karma on Kawaki's clone, but the karma didn't get a chance to extract its data into the clone before the clone was released. So this explains why the karma data was not transferred to Kawaki. So if it was a case where the karma did remain on Kawaki's clone and began the extraction process, then the data would have been transferred over to Kawaki. But that didn't happen. The clone ended up dying and Isshiki ended up dying before any of that. So I think we could use that to explain away that theory. But again, I'm just kind of, messing around here and thinking about how it could work and how it could not work. So I'm not going to just talk about why it could work. I'm also going to give a way to disprove the theory, because I think that's only fair, especially when you know there's a way to disprove it. Why not just say it in the video itself? So that's what I always do when creating theories. If I see a way where I can disprove my own theory, I'm going to put it forward and maybe put a point forward as well that could disprove that point. And maybe if I can't, I'll just leave it there, just like I'm going to do right now. So that is basically the theory. I could go more in depth, but I don't think we need a longer video for this. I just explained why it should be the case and why it may not be the case. So take that as you will. So this is the end of the video. Let me know what you guys think about it. Drop a like and subscribe if you're new, and look out for more content. Peace.